Imagine you are standing in the unforgiving, sweltering heat of the Australian Northern Territory. The red dust of the outback stretches endlessly toward the horizon, shimmering in the midday sun. It is one of the most isolated, desolate, and massive expanses of unbroken terrain on the face of the Earth. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by the deafening, rhythmic thumping of heavy rotor blades. Cresting the tree line is a squadron of MV-22 Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft, transitioning seamlessly from airplane mode to helicopter mode as they prepare to assault a designated landing zone. To the untrained eye, this looks like a standard American military exercise. The Osprey is, after all, the iconic workhorse of the United States Marine Corps. But as the massive aircraft touch down and the rear ramps drop into the dirt, the troops pouring out into the Australian scrub are not wearing the stars and stripes. They are not speaking English, and they are not operating under the command structure of the Pentagon. They are wearing the distinctive camouflage of the Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force. On their shoulders, they bear the insignia of the Amphibious Rapid Deployment Brigade, the ARDB. And they are operating with a speed, aggression, and kinetic violence that hasn't been seen in the Japanese military since 1945. What you are witnessing is not a polite cultural exchange. It is not a diplomatic photo opportunity. It is the uncaging of the West's most lethal Asian ally. For decades, the strategic planners in Beijing assumed that the Japanese military was a defensive, domesticated force, physically constrained by its own crowded geography and politically paralyzed by a pacifist constitution. They assumed Japan would never develop the offensive teeth required to project power across the ocean. They were wrong. The Anglosphere realized that to deter the massive industrial scale of the Chinese Communist Party, Japan needed a place to take the gloves off. They needed a laboratory to test their weapons, refine their combined arms doctrine, and forge an interchangeable war machine. So Australia handed them the keys to the Outback. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are analyzing the ultimate geopolitical proving ground, and how the free world is building a unified wall of steel in the Pacific. Here is the thesis for this episode. You cannot fight a 21st century war with a military that has never practiced fighting at scale. And you cannot deter a superpower alone. The United States, Australia, and Japan are no longer operating as three separate nations with three separate militaries. They are actively fusing their doctrines into a single, borderless, highly lethal combat architecture. For years, the story of the Indo-Pacific was the story of Chinese expansion. Beijing built artificial islands, militarized the South China Sea, and churned out destroyers at a rate that terrified the Pentagon. The West appeared fractured, reactive, and slow. But beneath the surface, a massive structural shift was occurring. Australia, realizing that its own geographic isolation was its greatest strategic asset, offered its continent up as the forge where the free world could sharpen its sword. We are going to break down the island hunters, the terrifying capabilities of Japan's new ARDB, and why they are purpose-built to break the Chinese Navy's anti-access/area denial network. We are going to explore the gloves-off environment of the Australian outback, exposing why the restrictive geography of Japan was suffocating their military potential. And we are going to analyze the trilateral war machine, the seamless, plug-and-play interoperability that allows an American pilot to drop bombs based on coordinates generated by a Japanese Marine, supported by an Australian artillery battery. If you are beginning to grasp why a Japanese tilt-rotor aircraft landing in the red dirt of the Northern Territory represents a catastrophic, multi-front nightmare for authoritarian regimes, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We strip away the political rhetoric to bring you the cold, hard, kinetic realities of modern great power competition. Your support ensures we can keep delivering this level of forensic military analysis. Now, let's look at the elite Japanese force that is causing sleepless nights in Beijing. To understand the absolute magnitude of what it means to see Japanese combat troops executing live-fire amphibious assaults in Australia, we must first look at the psychological and legal cage that Japan operated inside for 70 years. Following the devastation of the Second World War, the Japanese Constitution was rewritten under American occupation. Article 9 of that constitution famously renounced war as a sovereign right and strictly forbade the maintenance of land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential. For decades, the Japanese Self-Defense Forces (JSDF) operated under the strictest defensive parameters on Earth. Their doctrine was purely static. They were organized to repel a Soviet armored invasion of the northern island of Hokkaido, or to protect the immediate sea lanes surrounding Tokyo Bay. The very concept of power projection, the ability to send troops across the ocean to strike an enemy on foreign soil, was politically toxic and legally prohibited. They possessed no aircraft carriers, no long-range land attack cruise missiles, and absolutely no marines. But geopolitics is a brutal, unsentimental teacher. In the 2010s, the strategic environment surrounding Japan began to deteriorate at a terrifying pace. The People's Republic of China began aggressively and violently asserting its territorial claims over the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea, islands administered by Japan. Chinese Coast Guard vessels, maritime militias, and naval combatants began probing Japanese defenses daily. Simultaneously, Beijing constructed massive, fortified military bases on artificial reefs in the South China Sea, effectively claiming ownership of the international waters that carry Japan's vital energy imports. Strategic planners in Tokyo realized that strict, static pacifism was no longer a shield, it was a suicide pact. If the People's Liberation Army, PLA, suddenly landed a battalion of troops on a remote Japanese island in the Ryukyu chain and fortified it with anti-ship missiles, the JSDF had absolutely no specialized, dedicated force capable of taking it back. They realized they needed a spear. In 2018, shedding decades of political hesitation, Japan officially activated the Amphibious Rapid Deployment Brigade, ARDB. This is not a defensive guard force. This is a highly specialized, aggressively postured, offensive vanguard. Modeled heavily on the United States Marine Corps, the ARDB is explicitly built for one specific nightmare scenario for Beijing: the violent, kinetic recapture of fortified islands within the first island chain. When Beijing saw the ARDB stand up, they realized that the era of uncontested Chinese expansion was over. The sleeping samurai had awoken. The hardware of the spearhead. An elite military unit is only as lethal as the hardware it brings to the fight. Japan did not just create a new organizational chart. They poured billions of dollars into equipping the ARDB with the most advanced, specialized amphibious warfare technology available in the Western arsenal. When you look at the composition of the ARDB, you are looking at a force designed for speed, vertical envelopment, and overwhelming shock action. First, they acquired the AAV-7, Amphibious Assault Vehicle. These are massive, 30-ton armored tracked vehicles capable of launching from the well deck of an amphibious transport ship miles off the coast, swimming through heavy ocean surf, and driving directly onto a hostile beach, disgorging a squad of heavily armed infantry directly into the teeth of enemy defenses. While the U.S. Marine Corps is transitioning away from the AAV for Japan, it represents a brand new vital capability for forced entry operations. But storming a beach is notoriously bloody and predictable. To achieve true tactical surprise, the ARDB needed to strike from the sky. Japan became the first international customer for the Bell Boeing V-22 Osprey. The Osprey is a technological marvel that fundamentally alters the geometry of the battlefield. It combines the vertical takeoff and landing capabilities of a helicopter with the speed, range, and high-altitude performance of a fixed-wing turboprop aircraft. This means a Japanese amphibious-ready group can sit hundreds of miles offshore, safely over the horizon and out of range of enemy coastal defense cruise missiles. From that safe distance, they can launch a squadron of Ospreys, flying at 300 miles per hour, carrying combat-ready ARDB Marines. The Ospreys can bypass the heavily defended beaches entirely, flying deep inland to execute a vertical envelopment, dropping troops directly onto the enemy's command and control nodes, artillery positions, or airfields. To protect these vulnerable transport assets, the ARDB is deeply integrated with the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force, JSDF, specifically their growing fleet of F-35A and F-35B stealth fighters. The F-35 provides the invisible, omniscient overwatch, utilizing its advanced sensor fusion to clear the airspace of enemy fighters and suppress enemy air defenses before the Ospreys even cross the coastline. This is a highly complex, phenomenally violent choreography of air, sea, and land assets. It requires split-second timing, perfect communication, and relentless, repetitive practice. And that is exactly the problem Japan faced. They had built the ultimate island hunting weapon, but they had nowhere to test it. The tyranny of the Japanese archipelago. The fundamental paradox of the modern Japanese military is that it is an extraordinarily wealthy, technologically advanced force trapped inside a geographical cage. Japan is an archipelago of over 6,000 islands, but the vast majority of its 125 million citizens are crammed into the narrow coastal plains of the four main islands. The interior is dominated by steep, impassable mountains. It is one of the most densely populated, highly urbanized landmasses on the planet. For a modern, mechanized military trying to prepare for high-intensity, multi-domain warfare, this geography is a disaster. If a Japanese artillery commander wants to fire a Type 99 155mm self-propelled howitzer at its maximum effective range of 30 to 40 kilometers, he cannot simply set up a firing position in the foothills of Mount Fuji and let the shells fly. He has to worry about the projectile trajectory passing over 3 civilian towns, a high-speed bullet train line, an international shipping lane, and a commercial fishing fleet. If an F-35 pilot wants to practice dropping live, 500-pound joint direct attack munitions, DAMs, in a coordinated close air support drill with infantry on the ground, the environmental regulations, noise complaints and safety restrictions in Japan make it almost impossible to execute at a meaningful scale. The training ranges in Japan are small, heavily restricted, and completely scripted. Units must schedule their live-fire exercises months in advance, and they are confined to tiny, predictable boxes of land or ocean. You cannot prepare for the chaotic, unscripted, sprawling violence of a war with China by practicing in a highly regulated sandbox. When training is neutered by safety and spatial constraints, the reality of war is sterilized. The ARDB was in danger of becoming a paper tiger, a force that looked incredible on a spreadsheet but lacked the institutional muscle memory that only comes from massive, unrestricted field operations. The United States and Australia looked at this critical vulnerability and realized that if Japan was going to be the northern anchor of the free world's defense, they needed to be unleashed. The Outback Laboratory. The solution to Japan's geographical claustrophobia lay 4,000 miles to the south, in the vast, red heart of the Australian continent. Australia possesses the one strategic asset that Japan, the UK, and even parts of the United States desperately lack: empty space. Millions upon millions of acres of harsh, unforgiving, unrestricted terrain. To empower the Japanese military, Australia opened the doors to its most expansive military training areas in the Northern Territory in Queensland, specifically the Bradshaw Field Training Area, the Mount Bundy Training Area, and the Shoalwater Bay Training Area. To comprehend the scale of these facilities, you have to look at the map. Bradshaw alone covers over 8,700 square kilometers. That is an area significantly larger than the entire nation of Brunei. It is a massive expanse of tropical savanna, escarpments, and river systems that perfectly mimics the grueling, humid, challenging environments found in the Southeast Asian littoral and the South China Sea. In the Outback, the ARDB can finally take the gloves off. During massive, biennial mega exercises like Talisman Sabre, and dedicated trilateral deployments like Southern Jackaroo, the Japanese military is no longer confined to a sandbox. They are operating in a sprawling, dynamic laboratory of war. In the Northern Territory, a Japanese artillery battery can set up a fire base and unleash a synchronized, battalion-level barrage of 155mm high-explosive shells, firing them to their absolute maximum range, without the slightest concern of hitting a civilian population center. Japanese amphibious assault ships, like the Osumi class, can sit off the coast of Queensland and launch massive waves of AAVs and landing craft hovercraft, ULCACs, onto the beaches of Shoalwater Bay, while simultaneously launching waves of MV-22 Ospreys deep into the interior. They can practice the complex, highly dangerous art of deconfliction, ensuring that the artillery shells raining down from the sky do not intersect with the flight paths of the F-35's dropping guided bombs, while the infantry maneuvers below. This is the chaotic, unscripted reality of combined arms maneuver warfare. The Australian Outback allows the Japanese commanders to make mistakes, to push their supply lines to the breaking point, to experience the friction of operating in a harsh climate, and to learn how to recover when the plan falls apart. By providing this massive, unrestricted laboratory, Australia is not just hosting a training exercise, they are actively accelerating the operational maturity of the Japanese military. They are transforming the ARDB from a theoretical capability into a battle-hardened, combat-ready spearhead. The end of sovereign silos. While the sheer scale of the live-fire training is impressive, the true strategic genius of these Outback deployments lies in who the Japanese are training with. If a major conflict erupts in the Indo-Pacific, it will not be a series of isolated, bilateral duels. Japan will not fight China alone. Australia will not fight China alone. The United States will not fight China alone. The survival of the Western Alliance depends entirely on their ability to fight as a single, cohesive, integrated organism. For decades, the standard model of military alliances was deconfliction. American forces would take one sector of the battlefield, Australian forces would take another, and Japanese forces would take a third. They would communicate occasionally to ensure they didn't shoot each other, but they operated in completely separate sovereign silos, with separate supply chains, separate communications networks, and separate command structures. Against the overwhelming mass and centralized command of the People's Liberation Army, that siloed approach is a recipe for defeat. The deployments in the Australian Northern Territory are deliberately designed to obliterate those silos. They are forging the trilateral war machine. The ARDB Marines are not just visiting Australia for a few weeks, they are increasingly engaging in sustained rotational deployments. They are permanently embedding alongside the United States Marine Rotational Force Darwin, MRFD, and the elite soldiers of the Australian Defence Force's 1st Brigade. This means that a Japanese platoon, an American Marine platoon, and an Australian Army platoon are living in the same barracks, sweating in the same heat, eating in the same mess halls, and bleeding in the same dirt. They are building a level of human interoperability, absolute trust, and fraternal brotherhood that no diplomatic treaty signed in a boardroom can ever replicate. When a Japanese sergeant knows exactly how an American squad leader reacts under pressure, the friction of coalition warfare evaporates. Interchangeable lethality in action. But the integration goes far beyond human relationships. It strikes at the very core of technical and tactical interoperability. The goal of the trilateral war machine is interchangeable lethality. The West is standardizing its equipment, its data links, and its command architecture so seamlessly that the origin of the weapon or the nationality of the operator no longer matters. In the skies over the Australian outback during these exercises, we are seeing the manifestation of the plug-and-play doctrine. All three nations operate the F-35 Lightning II stealth fighter. All three nations utilize the Multifunction Advanced Data Link, MADL, and the Link 16 network. This means that a Japanese F-35A flying over the Timor Sea can use its incredibly advanced APG-81 radar to detect a simulated enemy surface fleet. The Japanese pilot does not need to relay that information back to Tokyo. The jet's computer automatically fuses that radar track and beams it securely and instantly across the network. An Australian Hobart-class destroyer sitting off the coast of Darwin sees that exact same radar track on its Aegis combat screens in real time. An American Marine Corps HIMARS high-mobility artillery rocket system, battery hidden in the jungle of the Bradshaw training area, receives the exact same targeting coordinates. The Japanese aircraft provided the eyes. The Australian ship and the American truck provide the fist. They execute a synchronized, simultaneous time-on-target strike, launching a swarm of missiles from 3 different domains, commanded by 3 different nations, based on the sensor data of a single Allied jet. Furthermore, we are seeing the absolute standardization of logistics. During exercises like Talisman Sabre, Japanese MV-22 Ospreys practice landing on the Australian outback, the Trilateral Alliance has created a massive, redundant, highly resilient superfleet. It forces Beijing to fight a multi-front, multinational war machine that is too complex and too deeply integrated to be decapitated by a single preemptive strike. Archipelagic defense in the first island chain. So, why does a Japanese Marine firing an artillery shell in the Australian desert matter to the global balance of power? How does the dust of the Northern Territory translate into geopolitical reality in the Western Pacific? It matters because the tactics being perfected in Australia are the exact tactics required to execute the doctrine of archipelagic defense. Look at the map of the first island chain. It stretches from the Japanese home islands, down through the Ryukyu Arc, including Okinawa, past Taiwan and down to the Philippines. This chain of islands forms a natural geographic wall that separates the Chinese mainland from the deep, open waters of the Pacific Ocean. For the Chinese Navy to project power globally, to threaten Hawaii, to isolate Australia, or to strike the continental United States, they deploy land-based, long-range anti-ship missiles, like the Type 12 surface-to-ship missile, and advanced air defense batteries. They will link their sensors into the trilateral data web. They will effectively turn these tiny islands into unsinkable aircraft carriers and fortified missile bastions. By creating overlapping threat rings, the ARDB can lock down the surrounding ocean. They can create a physical and electronic barricade that traps the Chinese Navy inside the East China Sea. If a Chinese Type 055 cruiser attempts to break out through the Miyako Strait, it will be engaged by a swarm of stealthy, sea-skimming missiles launched by Japanese Marines hiding in the jungle of a remote island, guided by data from an Australian P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft, and covered by American F-35 into the region. Let us know your tactical assessment in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay integrated, and we'll see you in the next one.